Good morning, and it's very early morning as I'm recording this. I am Miss Tyler, of course, and welcome to Context for Kids episode, Gospel Studies, Matthew 2. This is going to be our first Matthew 2 lesson, but we're doing something different. Did you know that I believe there are 7 actual geographical places in Matthew 2? Now, I'll tell you the truth. When people read the Bible, they just kind of generally read over the geography. And by geography, I mean places. You know how you got your nouns are people, places, or things? Well, people don't tend to read over the people, and they're much better about not reading over things, but places, yeah, people just kind of skim over them. But we need to know about all these places because they're important. You know, there are words in Bibles that are place names that sometimes they're place names, sometimes they're not place names. They can be ethnic, they can refer to people. So we have to learn how to know the difference based on the context. And for this week, we are going to talk about the first of the place names listed in Matthew 2, and that is Bethlehem. And of course, you've all heard of Bethlehem. So here we go. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is the one who was born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him." Well, right here, we've got a whole bunch of places. We've got Bethlehem, and we're going to talk about this week. Got Judea. We're going to talk about that next week. After that, we're going to talk about, oh no, there's another one. I can't believe it. The East. We're going to talk about the East because I'm going to maybe surprise you about where I think the Magi came from and who the Magi were. So what was to the east? Well, people in Bible days would have known. They wouldn't have been specific. Then we're going to talk about Jerusalem. I think we're going to have to take 2 weeks to talk about Jerusalem. And then on top of that, in Matthew 2, we also have to talk about Egypt, because Mary and Joseph and Jesus, Yeshua, went down to Egypt while Herod was still alive and wanting to kill him. And then we've got Nazareth and Galilee. So I think that's going to be like 8 lessons that we're going to have to do. Maybe 9. But like I said, I'm going to have to split Jerusalem into 2 because Jerusalem's huge. And then there's the Temple Mount on top of that, which we're not going to talk about in Matthew 2, but we will be talking about it, I believe, in Matthew 3. So, very exciting. All right, so we're calling this "O Little Town of Bethlehem," and I wish I had not called the lesson this, because now I've had this song in my head since like Saturday or Sunday. It won't go away. You know how to, hopefully it's not in your head now. If it is, I apologize. Okay, so let's talk about Bethlehem because Matthew 2 verse 1 talked about Bethlehem of Judea. Well, why did it say Bethlehem of Judea? Well, we're going to find out. Very good reason. Because all through the scriptures it never just, it usually doesn't just say Bethlehem, it gives you more information. Let's look at Micah 5:2. This is a very important messianic prophecy. And of course, a messianic prophecy is a prophecy that is about the then coming, still coming actually, because he's going to come back, but the then coming Messiah who was going to save Israel from their sins. And that means something interesting too, but you know what? We're going to find that out later. Not what we've been taught to believe. Okay, salvation of sins. What did that mean to a first century Jew? You're just going to have to wait. Okay, so let's look at Micah 5:2. "But you, O Bethlehem Ephratah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient days." Wow, that doesn't sound like a normal guy, does it? Well, it's not a normal guy. It's the Messiah. It's the Son of God. All right. Let's look at Luke 2:11. This is what was spoken to the shepherds who were in the field. And we're going to talk about the shepherds and why shepherds are associated with Bethlehem. Very interesting. You might not know this, or maybe you do. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior who is Christ the Lord. City of David. Well, in Matthew we see that he was born in Bethlehem of Judea. And here in Luke it says the city of David. So what does the city of David have to do with Bethlehem? Well, it's really an interesting story, and it's one that goes all the way back to Genesis. So let's go to a map, and I'm going to put this one big up on the screen, not just how I have it here. Now, I got these maps from a really great website that I would love for you to go to. It's called Bible History Online, www.bible-history.com. And this is their Israel and New Testament times map. All right, so you will see that I have some pink spots and some green spots and some blue. And I'm not really very good at doing this on PowerPoint, so some of the little spots are a little bit messy. So in the southern part of the screen, we have in pink, we have Jerusalem. And of course, Jerusalem was the capital city of Judea, of Israel in those times. And in Roman times, the whole idea about Israel and Judea was kind of complicated, so we're going to learn a lot in the next couple months. So we got Jerusalem in pink. Right below, we have got Bethlehem in green. And I put blue around Hebron. Now, Hebron was the city of Caleb, one of the two spies. Because of Caleb's faithfulness, God gave him the pick of the land. He wanted the land that he had scouted out because he saw it was very good. And that land was down in Hebron. Okay? That is where the patriarchs are buried. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, and Jacob, and Leah. But wait, what about Rachel? Well, Rachel is where Bethlehem first comes into the Bible. So Bethlehem, as we see, was on the road from Jerusalem to Hebron. Okay, so the first time we see Bethlehem, or it's also referred to as Ephrath, is in Genesis 35 and 48 with the death of Rachel. That's Jacob's most beloved wife. All right, so we've got Rachel in Genesis 35 and 48, which we'll talk about in a minute. Then we've got Naomi's family in the book of Ruth. Now remember, we did a teaching, why is Ruth in the genealogy of Messiah? Remember, she was a Moabite. And Moabites were forbidden to be in the assembly of Israel. Unless. And if you want to find out the unless, you've got to watch that episode, because I can't talk about it here. It's in Ruth 1. You talk about Naomi's family and Boaz. And then you have David's family, King David's family in 1 Samuel 16 and 17 and elsewhere in the book of 1 Samuel. Okay, so first, let's go to the first time Bethlehem shows up in scriptures. So it says in Genesis 35:19, it says, so Rachel died and she was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Okay, so it is mentioned as being close by, either close by Bethlehem or in Bethlehem, which is near Ephrath. You know, a lot of people aren't exactly sure if Ephrath was the region that Bethlehem was in, that it was an ancient name for the region, or if there was a wealthy family who had the land there. You know, there's a lot of debate, and scholars aren't sure, because there's all this language, and it kind of makes Bethlehem seem the same as Ephrathah, or Ephrath, or it seems like it's in the region, or just other things, and it's just one of those mysteries that we don't know for sure, but it doesn't really change the Bible story. Because one way or another, Bethlehem is linked with Ephrathah. Okay, so in Genesis 48, and I did not put the verse, sorry, as for me, when I came from Padan, to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan on the way, where there was still some distance to go to Ephrath, and I buried her there on the way to Ephrath. That means Bethlehem. Okay, so here we see it again, linked to the death of Rachel. Rachel was buried somewhere near Bethlehem, somewhere near Ephrath. Okay, now let's look at Naomi. Now, of course, Naomi's interesting. Now, Rachel isn't in any way linked with the genealogy of Messiah, of Yeshua, Jesus. She isn't. That was the other wife, Leah, the unbeloved wife. She was the mother of both Judah and Levi, who became the most prominent tribes. So let's look at Naomi and the book of Ruth. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And of course, you know, a famine is when there is no food. And a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and 2 sons. Okay, I'm going to show you really quick where Moab was. Moab was right here. Okay, so they were from Bethlehem and they traveled here because there was food there during this time. Okay. So it really wasn't that far away, except they didn't have cars. So, you know, there is that. All right, then in Ruth 4:11, then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses, may the Lord make the woman, Ruth, who is coming into your house, Boaz's house, like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel, may you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. So we see Naomi's family was from Bethlehem, and they were related to Boaz. They were also from Bethlehem. And we're going to see that Ruth, who the book is about, and Boaz, who the book is also about, are 2 ancestors of King David and therefore Yeshua, Jesus. Okay, but they're very prominent ancestors. And we see that they lived in Bethlehem, Ephrathah. And it says in Ruth 1:1, Bethlehem in Judah. Sorry, I am just tired this morning. Okay, now let's look at King David. Now we're getting good. King David. So, the Lord said to Samuel, this is in 1 Samuel 16:1, the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you grieve over King Saul, since I have rejected him from being king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king from among his sons. Now Jesse was the grandson of Boaz and Ruth from the book of Ruth. So David was their great-grandson. Now let's look at 1 Samuel 17, verses 12. Now David was the son of an Ephrathite in Bethlehem in Judah, named Jesse, who had 8 sons. In the days of Saul, the man was already old and advanced in years. Why does it keep saying Bethlehem in Judah, or Bethlehem Ephrathah, over and over and over again? Why on earth do that? It's like if there was a city and, well, it's like nobody says New York City, New York. They just say New York City. You know where it is. People say Dallas. You know where it is? Dallas, Texas. Houston. San Antonio. Also, you can tell that I actually used to live in Texas. Boise. People know where Boise is. I live in Idaho Falls. Guess where that is? But they keep stressing Judah, and they keep stressing Ephrathah. Now, one of the coolest, we'll see why in a bit. Now, one of the coolest stories about Bethlehem, and it's probably actually, well, except for, Messiah's birth, okay, that is officially the coolest story. It has to do with David's well, and we find this in 2 Samuel 23. And at this time, the Philistines have overrun and have established a garrison, the evil Philistines, in Bethlehem. And that's David's home city. It's the city of David, like we see in Luke 2:11. So, but they've taken over. In those days, the Philistines were running rampant over the land. We see it all through the book of Judges, and that goes into the time of Saul and the time of David until he finally conquers them all. But during this time, he hadn't yet, and he's sitting with his mighty men, in a nearby town, and he said, "Oh, if only I could have a drink from the well in Bethlehem." So I think it was like 3 of his mighty men. Well, they take off in the middle of the night and they fight their way through the enemy lines. Well, it's not single-handedly, it's triple-handedly because there are 3 of them. And they get him a dipper full of water. And they go chucking back to give it to him. And he gets the cup of water, he's horrified. Because he realizes that just him saying, "Oh, I would love to have," and he was just saying it to say it. He wasn't telling them to do it, but they loved him so much that they went and risked their lives to do it. He poured it out on the ground because far be it from me to, drink of the blood of my men or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But really what he was saying was, whoa, I can't encourage this kind of behavior. You shouldn't have risked your life just to get me a drink of water from my family's well in Bethlehem. But still, that's a really cool story. All right. Now, why does it keep saying where Bethlehem is? I mean, we get it. Bethlehem, Ephrathah, Bethlehem, and Judah. Whoa, okay. Because there's another Bethlehem. And we first come across it in Joshua 19. It's actually Bethlehem of Zebulun, up in that tribe's holdings. One of the tribes was named Zebulun. And so, again, we've got pink, Nazareth. Nazareth is where Yeshua grew up. Well, the funny thing is, I should have shown you back when we had the other map. Bethlehem of Judah is only about 6 miles, let's go southwest of Jerusalem. And there's actually a road that goes there. Well, there's another Bethlehem, and it is actually about the same distance away from Nazareth, except it's northwest. And that's where Yeshua grew up. Okay? So there's a reason why they're saying which Bethlehem, because there would have been confusion if they had not been specific. I mean, if somebody grew up in a certain place, and you say, and there are 2 towns, and one of them's closer to the place he grew up with, wouldn't you assume that this was the Bethlehem he was born in? Up in Galilee? I mean, he grew up in the Galilee. So anyway, that's why the Bible is over and over and over again saying he was born in Bethlehem of Judah. Because remember, Micah 5:2 was very specific and said that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem Ephrathah. Yeshua's claim would mean nothing if he was from Bethlehem of Zebulun. So, that's really cool. Let's see. So yeah, we've got 2 Bethlehems, and actually there's also a 3rd Bethlehem, I believe, in the land of Tyre, but that's not legally within Israel. So, they didn't count that. They didn't count that. Okay, so like I said, Bethlehem of Zebulun, Galilee, in Joshua 19, and all of the other Bethlehems are always called Bethlehem Ephrathah, Bethlehem Judah, Bethlehem of Judah. Let's go back. So which Bethlehem was he born in? Well, it's really easy. Well, Matthew 2:1 says Bethlehem of Judah. Luke 2:11 says he was born in the city of David, and we know that David was born in Bethlehem of Judah because here in 1 Samuel 16:11, I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. 1 Samuel 17:12. Now David was the son of the Ephrathite, Jesse, who was from Bethlehem, Judah. Ruth 1:1. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah. Ruth 4:11. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. And remember, Ruth and Boaz were the great-grandmother and grandfather of King David. But now we're going to get something interesting, because Bethlehem isn't only associated with being the city of David, although that is the most famous association. Okay? It's also associated with Levites. Now, if you'll remember, we've talked about Levites before. Levites were the descendants of Leah's third son, Levi. Now remember, Leah had 7 children, okay? First one was Reuben, second one was Simeon, third one was Levi, fourth one was Judah, okay? Now, she had kind of a tragic life because her husband didn't love her, and that wasn't her fault. But Levi, the third son, was going to be the ancestor of all the people who would be the Levites and the priest. Now remember, all descendants of Levi are Levites, but not all are priests. In order to be a priest, you have to be a descendant of Aaron, Moses' older brother. Nobody else could be priest except for the sons as descendants of Aaron. Everybody else was a Levite. Now, don't just say they were just a Levite, because they still got to do some amazing things. Levites got to work in the tabernacle and temple doing different jobs. They were especially over the music. They were also like the guards, so they got to do a lot of really cool stuff. What they also got to do is raise animals for the temple. They got to raise the best animals. They had cities throughout the land of Israel. Now, they set them up originally with a certain number of cities, and they said, as you get more and more people, set yourself up more cities. Now, Bethlehem is not listed as one of the original Levitical cities where the Levites lived and where they took care of their flocks. But in the book of Judges, we start seeing Levites popping up with respect to Bethlehem. Judges 17:17. There was a young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah. Judges 19:1. Now a Levite, this is with the story with the Levite and his concubine. He had a concubine from Bethlehem. So we've got all these stories with Levites in Bethlehem. And it actually makes sense, especially in later times, especially when the temple was moved to, well, the tabernacle was decommissioned because they had to keep replacing the curtains and everything. It was getting worn out, and it was moved to Jerusalem. And by Solomon, it was moved to the Temple Mount. Now, a lot of people think that, a lot of scholars think, see, I'm not making this up. This is scholars saying this because I'm not as smart as they are. So there are scholars who believe that Bethlehem became a Levitical city, because what better city to raise sheep in, to raise lambs and goats and cattle in, than right outside of Jerusalem in excellent pasture land. We know that David's family were originally shepherds. Okay, now they weren't Levites. They were shepherds, though. And so there is a belief that Bethlehem either became a Levitical city, or they used the fields outside of the city to raise the sacrificial animals for Jerusalem. And if that was the case, well, let's look at Micah 4:8 here. This is very close before that verse I read you about Messiah being born in Bethlehem Ephrathah. Okay, O you tower, and you, O tower of the flock. Tower of the flock means Migdal Eder. And they had towers that were associated with the Levitical shepherds. Hill of the daughter of Zion, to you it shall come. The former dominion shall come, kingship for the daughter of Jerusalem. Tower of the flock. Well, this is referring to the shepherds who would be in Bethlehem or in the surrounding areas. And so we have these shepherds that show up in Messiah's birth story in Luke 2, verses 8 through 20. You know, like I said before, Levites had certain jobs. They raised the sacrificial animals. They were the ones in charge for music in the temple. They did support work for the temple, not only guarding, but administrative duties too. Now, you might hear, a lot of times you'll hear this thing, that that shepherds were the lowest of the low. They really weren't respected. But Levitical shepherds were not lowly. They were entrusted with raising animals that were perfectly fit for paying tribute to God. And remember, most sacrifices had nothing to do with sin. And really, whenever it says sin sacrifice, it just means purification. It's when it says guilt offerings that it's actually sin, and very few of the sacrifices were for that. So let's read here. Now there were shepherds in the same region, living out in the fields and guarding their flocks at night. Suddenly an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone all around them, and they were absolutely terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for behold, I proclaim good news to you, which will be great joy to all the people. A Savior is born to you today in the city of David, who is Christ the Lord. And the sign to you is this: you will find an infant wrapped in strips of cloth and lying in a manger." And suddenly a multitude of the heavenly armies appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to man of good will." And when the angels departed from them into the heavens, the shepherds were saying to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which God has made known to us." So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby lying in the manger. When they had seen this, they made known to the world made known the word that had been spoken to them concerning this child. And those who heard were amazed at the things the shepherds told them. But Mary treasured all these things, pondering them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for the things they had heard and seen, just as they had been told. So the Levites were in charge of certain things in the kingdom of Israel from the beginning. One, like we said, they raised sacrificial animals. They maintained Levitical cities. They were responsible for praising God in the music in the temple. They did the support work for the temple. They were also in charge of teaching the people the difference between clean and unclean, holy and unholy. They were supposed to teach the people right from wrong in days before they had Bibles. And so we've got these shepherds who have been chosen to do a lot of these things. They have been chosen to be witnesses of God's word. Well, that was one of the Levitical jobs. They were out raising flocks in the vicinity of Jerusalem, which was a Levitical job. Let's see. They were chosen to be messengers. That's a Levitical job. They were chosen to go and worship the child. Okay? So, they were witnesses, and they were being taken seriously. Now, if these were lowly shepherds that no one was going to listen to, it is unlikely they would have been chosen. And so a lot of people believe that they were Levitical, that they were that they were God's shepherds, sent to witness to the birth of the one who would shepherd his people Israel. Now, Shekalim 7.4, I've told you about the Kahati Mishnah and about reading from the legal codes of the Jews as things were during the life of Messiah. Shekalim 7.4 specifically talks about any animals that are found between Jerusalem and Bethlehem belonging to the Lord. Okay, it's a little more complicated than that, but in essence, that's what it's talking about. And so that's just another thing that leads people to believe that, you know what, maybe Levites were raising those flocks, and maybe it was Levites who were sent to go and see the Messiah as a baby and report on what they had heard. All right, so this week's discipleship moment, and this one's hard, especially when you're learning stuff, okay? Especially when you're learning stuff a lot of other people don't know. You don't want to be know-it-alls. Oh, yeah, and sometimes I want to be a know-it-all. Do you want to be a know-it-all sometimes? Especially when someone's pretending they're a know-it-all. I love this. See this? Willy Wonka, the real Willy Wonka. People who think they know everything are especially annoying to those of us who do. No, just kidding. I wish I knew everything, but I don't. There are an awful lot of things that I don't know. You know, as you're learning things about the Bible especially, you don't want to be insufferable. You want to allow other people to know things too. But you don't want to go around showing off. And you know, that's unfortunately something that a lot of grown-ups do with the Bible. They go around showing off. They go around looking for ways to show what they know or to school people. And you know, there's a difference between teaching people and schooling them, right? Teaching people generally means that they've asked you and they recognize you as a teacher and you're instructing them, you know, at the level that they're at and not to impress them. Schooling them means that you want them to know that you are all that in a bag of chips and that they need to just get down on their knees and bow down to your excellent, you know, and you're doing it to embarrass them, put them in their place. That's schooling. You know, teaching someone is always good if we have information and if they have asked us. I don't force myself on people. I don't. Unless you're on my Facebook wall, and then it's your choice whether to read or not. But don't be a know-it-all. Be gracious. You know, nobody knew more than Yeshua, Jesus. Nobody, and nobody ever will. And you know what? He would go when he would go into the synagogues, he would wait for them to call him up to the bema, which is where they kept the Torah scroll to read. He wasn't getting up making a ruckus saying, oh my gosh, you guys are so wrong about all this, let me tell you how it is. No, he would wait till he was asked. When he would go out in public, he would stand in the public square and preach. And anyone who wanted to listen to him could go to him. He didn't barge into people's houses and, yeah, you guys are sinners. And he didn't do that. And so as you get older, especially as you go onto social media, be careful to be like Yeshua. You know, you can go, there are some public places if you want to go and preach. And people can either listen to you or not. It's their choice. Okay? But don't go into people's side or living rooms and try and school them. Be polite. Have self-control. Just because you know something doesn't mean you have the right to assault people with it. As my friend Yolanda says, just because you're right doesn't mean you're right. Be gracious. You know what? If God has set you apart as a teacher, or if he wants you to share, he's going to make sure he gives you the opportunity for that information to come out, and you won't have to do underhanded, mean things to get that information out. People will come to you. Or he'll show you where to go where they can listen. Anyway, like I said, don't be a know-it-all. Now, next week we are going to talk about Judea, which I am finding out is a more complicated subject than I first thought. We're also going to talk about the word Jew, because the word Jew doesn't always mean the same thing every time it's used in the New Testament. Sometimes it means Judean. And what does Judean mean? We'll find out next week. So anyway, you take care. I love you. I'm praying for you, and I hope you have a wonderful week studying the scriptures together as a family. Bye-bye now.